When you're home alone, every little sound gets magnified. A house settling sounds like a footstep. The wind against the siding sounds like a whisper. Most of the time, it's just your mind playing tricks on you. But sometimes that sudden spike of adrenaline in your chest is telling you the absolute truth. The following three stories are allegedly true accounts from people who realized that being home alone was a luxury they no longer had. Story number one takes place in a secluded lake house in upstate New York. This happened during the fall of my junior year at Syracuse University. My parents had bought this gorgeous, super remote cabin right on the edge of Skaneateles Lake. It was surrounded by acres of thick woods, and the nearest neighbor was easily a mile down a bumpy, unpaved gravel road. That October, my parents flew down to Florida for a week-long vacation, leaving me behind to watch our golden retriever, Buster, and keep an eye on the property. Honestly, I was stoked. I packed my truck with groceries, my Xbox, and figured I'd just grind out some video games and enjoy the peace and quiet. The first couple of nights were totally chill. It was that crisp, eerie kind of fall weather where the wind makes the old trees groan, but inside with the fireplace going, it felt like an absolute fortress. But things took a weird turn on Tuesday night. It was around midnight, and I was sitting on our massive L-shaped couch in the living room. The back of the house is basically just giant, floor-to-ceiling glass windows that look straight out onto the dark lake and the wooden dock. At night, without the interior lights reflecting off the glass, it's just a wall of pure blackness. You can't see out, but anyone standing in the woods can see everything inside perfectly. I was right in the middle of an intense online match with my headset on when Buster suddenly stood up from his dog bed. His entire body went rigid. He didn't do a normal bark. He let out this low, vibrating growl from the back of his throat that literally made the hairs on my arms stand up. I pulled one side of my headphones off and looked at him. He was staring directly at the glass wall facing the lake. "What is it, boy? Just a deer?" I muttered, trying to sound brave. I walked over to the glass, cupping my hands around my eyes to block out the living room light so I could peer into the darkness. There was nothing. Just the black water and the silhouettes of the pines swaying in the wind. I managed to calm Buster down, threw him a treat, and went back to my game, completely ignoring the heavy, sinking feeling starting to form in my gut. By 2 a.m., the temperature outside dropped significantly, and a thick, soupy fog rolled off the lake, completely swallowing the dock. I finally decided to wrap up gaming and head to bed. I turned off the TV, locked the heavy front door, and walked down the long, narrow hallway to my bedroom at the end of the house. My bedroom also had a sliding glass door that opened up to a small, private back porch. I made sure the security bar was jammed into the door track, flipped off the lights, and crawled under the covers. I was just about to drift off to sleep when my phone, which was sitting face down on my nightstand, buzzed aggressively. I reached over, blinking against the bright screen. It was an automated alert from our AirTag tracker. My parents had attached an AirTag to Buster's collar a few months ago because he loved to run off into the woods after rabbits. The notification on my screen read, "Buster's AirTag detected near your location." I frowned. That didn't make any sense. Buster was sleeping right at the foot of my bed. I could hear his heavy breathing. I tapped the notification to open the Find My app to refresh the map. When the screen loaded, my heart skipped a beat. The app wasn't tracking the AirTag on Buster's collar. It said, "Unknown AirTag detected moving with you." According to the digital map, this completely random tracker had been pinging off my phone for the last 4 hours. The tracking history showed a dotted red line that started at the local gas station where I had stopped for snacks at 10 p.m., followed me all the way down the isolated gravel road, and was now sitting exactly on our property line. Someone had slipped a tracker into the bed of my truck while I was inside paying for my food. They had followed me home, and they knew exactly where I was. Pure, unadulterated panic hit me. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped my phone. I sat up in bed, staring wildly around my dark bedroom. I realized with absolute horror that if someone tracked my truck, they were outside right now. I reached into my nightstand drawer and grabbed my dad's old tactical flashlight, the heavy, solid metal kind that could double as a weapon. I crept out of bed, making sure not to make a single sound on the hardwood floors. I walked over to the sliding glass door of my bedroom, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The fog outside was so thick it looked like white smoke pressed against the glass. I raised the flashlight, aiming it through the window, and clicked the button. The powerful beam of light hit the fog, creating a blinding white wall. But right there, barely 3 inches away from the glass, was a man. He was crouching on my private porch, wearing a muddy camo jacket and a dark beanie. He was holding a heavy crowbar, right in the middle of trying to wedge it into the frame of my sliding door. When my flashlight beam illuminated his face, he didn't run. He didn't even look surprised. He just stopped freezing, tilted his head, and gave me this dead, vacant stare. I screamed at the top of my lungs, scrambled backward, and sprinted down the hallway toward the kitchen to grab the home phone. Buster started barking maniacally, rushing the bedroom door. I dialed 911, screaming my address to the operator, telling them someone was trying to break into my house with a crowbar. As I was talking to the dispatcher, I heard the horrifying sound of shattering glass coming from the back of the house. The guy had smashed through the bedroom window. I locked myself inside the master bathroom, holding a kitchen knife I had frantically grabbed, praying the cops would make it down that long gravel road in time. It took the state troopers 20 minutes to arrive. By the time they cleared the house, the guy was gone. They found my truck bed completely ransacked, and a small magnetic air tag was stuck inside the wheel well. They never caught him. To this day, I check my phone for unknown trackers every single time I drive home. Next story happened to a 24-year-old woman named Clara, who had just moved into her very first solo apartment in a newly developed suburban neighborhood just outside of Austin, Texas. I had just graduated college and landed a decent corporate job, so renting this place felt like a massive milestone for me. The apartment complex was super modern, featuring those high-tech smart locks where you enter a key code on a glowing pad instead of using a physical key. Since the area was still under construction, only about half of the units on my floor were occupied. It was incredibly quiet during the week, which I honestly loved. Because I was a young woman living alone, the very first thing I did after moving in was install a popular brand of smart video doorbell right next to my front door. It gave me peace of mind knowing I could see exactly who was standing in the hallway from an app on my phone. It was a rainy Thursday night in November, around 11:30 p.m. I was wrapped up in a blanket on my bed, watching a movie on my laptop with my headphones in. Out of nowhere, my phone lit up on the mattress next to me. I had set up my doorbell camera to send a push notification whenever it detected motion within 5 feet of my door. I picked it up, expecting it to be a neighbor walking their dog past my unit, or maybe a delayed Amazon delivery. The notification read, "Motion detected at front door." I tapped the app to view the live feed. The camera wide-angle lens showed the dimly lit, carpeted hallway of my building. Standing right in front of my door was a tall man wearing a neon yellow construction vest and a dirty baseball cap pulled down low. He had a clipboard in his left hand and a heavy tool bag slung over his shoulder. He looked like one of the maintenance workers who worked on the unfinished units downstairs. But it was almost midnight. Nobody from maintenance works at midnight. I watched the screen as he leaned his ear directly against my front door, listening intently to see if anyone was moving around inside. My breath hitched. I kept my headphones in, staring at the live video feed in absolute disbelief. The man stood there for a solid minute, just leaning against the wood, listening. Then he raised his hand and tapped the clipboard against the door, making 3 loud, sharp knocks that echoed through my quiet apartment. I didn't move an inch. I didn't make a sound. I knew that if I answered, he would know a solo female was inside. I hoped that if I stayed silent, he would just assume the unit was empty and leave. Instead, the man lowered his clipboard, reached into his heavy canvas tool bag, and pulled out a small electronic device with a glowing blue screen. He held it right up against my digital keypad lock. On the live video feed, I could hear a faint, high-pitched electronic humming sound coming from the device. A second later, the keypad on my door made a sharp beep, and the little LED light flashed from red to green. The lock mechanism turned itself over with a loud mechanical click. He had some sort of digital signal cloner, or a master bypass tool that the construction crew used to access empty apartments. My stomach dropped into a bottomless pit of pure terror. The doorknob began to slowly turn. He was pushing the door open. I scrambled out of my bed, completely forgetting about my laptop, and flew into my bedroom closet, pulling the slatted doors shut just as I heard my heavy front door swing open and hit the wall stop in the living room. Through the tiny slats of my closet door, I could see out into my bedroom. The apartment was completely silent except for the heavy, rhythmic thud of his work boots stepping onto my carpet. He was walking incredibly slowly, taking his time, completely aware that nobody was supposed to be there. I could hear him shuffling through my kitchen counters, opening and closing the cabinets, with a quiet, casual carelessness that made my skin crawl. He was looking for something, or someone. Then the footsteps started moving down the short hallway toward my bedroom. The beam of a small, bright flashlight cut through the darkness of my room, sweeping across my unmade bed, my desk, and finally landing directly on the closet doors where I was hiding. I pressed myself as far back into the corner of the closet as physically possible, burying my face into my hanging clothes, trying to suppress the violent shaking of my jaw. My phone was still in my hand, the screen completely dimmed. I opened my text messages and frantically typed a text to 911, a feature Austin has for emergencies. Intruder inside my apartment, 4200 Oak Ridge Lane, apartment 312, hiding in closet. He has a weapon. Through the slats, I watched the shadow of his boots stop right outside the closet. He stood there for what felt like an eternity. I could hear his heavy, raspy breathing. He reached out, his hand gripping the handle of the closet door. He began to pull it open. But right at that exact microsecond, a loud, piercing car alarm started blaring directly outside my bedroom window in the parking lot. It was my neighbor's car, likely triggered by the heavy rain or a stray animal. The sudden, deafening noise startled the guy. He let go of the closet handle, turned around, and walked quickly out of my bedroom, his boots slamming against the floor as he bolted out of the apartment, slamming the front door behind him. The police arrived 5 minutes later, but the guy was long gone. When they checked the security footage from the main lobby, they realized he had entered through a basement construction exit that had been left propped open with a brick. I broke my lease the very next morning. I don't care how secure a smart lock claims to be. Nothing replaces a heavy, old-fashioned metal deadbolt. Our final story comes from a guy named Ethan, who was working a remote IT job while living in a gritty, high-density apartment complex in downtown Atlanta, Georgia. This happened during the winter of 2023. Because I worked for a tech company based on the West Coast, my shift didn't end until 2 a.m. Eastern Time. By the time I logged off my computer, I was absolutely starving. But since it was a Tuesday night, literally every single restaurant in my neighborhood was completely shut down. The only option I had was a 24-hour fast food joint about 3 miles away that delivered through a popular smartphone app. I ordered a burger, some fries, and a soda, threw on some sweatpants, and sat back down at my desk to watch YouTube videos while I waited for the driver to arrive. Around 3:15 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from the app. "Your driver, Gary, has dropped off your order." Now I had specifically selected the leave at door option in the app because I didn't feel like dealing with small talk with a stranger at 3 in the morning. I waited about 2 minutes to give the guy enough time to walk back down the hallway to the elevator. Then I stood up and walked over to my front door. My apartment door had a standard metal peephole, and out of pure habit, I leaned forward and looked through it before opening the latch. The hallway was completely empty, and my white plastic delivery bag was sitting neatly on the carpet right outside. I unlocked the door, cracked it open, grabbed the bag, and quickly locked it back up. I sat down at my kitchen island and started eating, completely oblivious to the fact that something was deeply wrong with the delivery profile. I was about halfway through my burger when my phone buzzed again on the counter. It was a direct text message routed through the delivery app's encrypted server. It was from my driver, Gary. The text read, "Hey man, I'm so sorry, but I think I accidentally dropped your order off at the wrong apartment door. I'm walking back up to the 3rd floor right now to grab it and bring it to you." I stared at the message, completely confused. I looked down at the food I was actively eating. It was exactly what I ordered. The receipt stapled to the front of the bag had my name, my apartment number, and my exact order details printed on it. If the real driver was just now texting me that he dropped it off at the wrong door, then who the hell had dropped off the bag I was currently eating from? A cold wave of dread washed over my entire body. I stood up from the bar stool so fast it rattled against the island. I crept over to the front door, my heart pounding in my ears. I leaned my eye against the cold metal peephole again. The hallway was still empty, the fluorescent lights casting long, distorted shadows down the corridor. But as I kept my eye pressed to the glass, I noticed a subtle movement at the very edge of my vision. There was a narrow utility closet located directly opposite my apartment door, the kind of closet where the building stores water meters and electrical wiring. The heavy metal door to the utility closet was cracked open about 2 inches. Inside the pitch-black gap of that closet, I could distinctly see the reflection of a pair of eyes staring straight back at my apartment door. Someone had been hiding inside that tiny maintenance space, waiting for me to open my door. I backed away from the door, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I realized with absolute horror that the bag of food had been a bait trap. Someone had stolen my delivery order from the lobby downstairs, printed out my details, placed it at my door, and then hid in the utility closet across the hall, waiting for me to step outside to grab it so they could ambush me and force their way inside. Because I had opened the door and grabbed it so quickly, they didn't have time to react. But they were still out there, waiting. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered it, my voice trembling. "Hello?" I whispered. A voice on the other end spoke. It was a frantic, out-of-breath guy. "Hey, is this Ethan? This is Gary, your delivery driver." "Dude, do not open your door. I just got up to your floor, and some guy in a dark hoodie was standing outside your apartment trying to pick your lock. When he saw me, he flashed a knife at me and chased me back to the elevator. I'm down in the lobby right now calling the cops. Lock your doors." The moment Gary hung up, the doorknob to my apartment began to violently rattle back and forth. Someone was throwing their entire body weight against the door from the hallway, trying to force the frame to splinter. "Open the door!" a raspy voice screamed from the other side, followed by a heavy metallic thud as they kicked the center of the wood. I sprinted into my bedroom, grabbed my heavy desktop monitor, and braced myself against the bedroom door, dialing 911 on speakerphone. The slamming went on for 3 agonizing minutes until the distant wail of police sirens echoed from the street below. The guy fled down the emergency stairs just as the first officers entered the building. They found the utility closet across the hall filled with discarded wrappers and a large hunting knife left on the floor. I moved out of that complex 2 weeks later. Now, whenever I order food late at night, I don't care how hungry I am. I wait until the sun comes up before I ever open that door. It's easy to think that our homes are completely safe spaces once we turn the lock for the night. But the reality is, danger doesn't always wait outside your door. Sometimes it walks right up to it and knocks. The next time you find yourself home alone past midnight, pay attention to the little things. Double-check your locks. Keep your eyes on the shadows and listen closely to the silence, because you never truly know who might be watching you from the dark. Good night.